of the February 1st Finance and Personnel Committee to order. We have a 16-point agenda. Proof of notification. Was this meeting properly notified, Mr. Langer?
Yes, it was, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. We do have a quorum present. We have all 7 of us present today, 3 in the room and 4 on WebEx. So agenda item number 3, agenda approval. Looking for a motion to approve a
So moved.
16-point agenda. Motion by Brewer.
This is Dave. I'll second.
Second by Turk. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Agenda item number 4, previous meeting minutes. The only thing I notice is that Mr. Cooey, it looks like you were there and you were absent, but I think you were there. I'm sorry, I think you were absent. Is that right? At the last meeting? Can you hear me, Mr. Cooey?
I can hear you. You call me?
Mark Cooey? So the only change I noticed is that he's listed as one of the attendees, but he's also listed as absent, and I believe he was absent. So just looking for a motion to...
This is Cheryl. He was absent. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so just looking for a motion to approve those minutes with that change.
So moved.
Do a motion by Luck and a second by Brewer. Any further discussion on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. We have minutes approved. Agenda item number 5, tax deed process and report, Corporation Counsel and Treasurer. Mr. Langer, you want to start us off?
Sure, Mr. Chair, join. You have Treasurer Even and also Corporation Counsel Attorney Wendell are here with us. Documents presented in your file and online. We do have a copy of the current tax deed properties, as well as then I think we were going to go through kind of an explanation on how the current process works, to the best of my knowledge, and I can turn it over to Mike and Jeff to further explain.
Jeff, do you want to start or should I? I'll take that as I will. So the tax deed process has kind of been on the back burner while Treasurer Even has familiarized himself with the duty of his new role. I myself am more familiar with the in-rem process, so I spent that time refamiliarizing myself with the statute governing the tax deed process. Essentially, it starts with a notice to the delinquent property holders that the county is applying for a tax deed. That is mailed to them or personally served. If they cannot be so served, then it's sent for publication. So part of my role in that process is the treasurer orders title reports on all of the subject properties. I review those title reports, determine which parties may require notice, because it's not just the homeowner who may require notice. It may be mortgagers, or there's one there that's subject to a land contract, and so the contract holder needed to be notified. Once that's done, the treasurer attempts that initial notice. If the notice is returned or we're unable to get a hold of them, then we submit it for publication. Once all of that has been gone through, either we have the proof of notice or I file an affidavit of due diligence, basically saying we tried everything, we can't get a hold of these people, and that suffices for the issuance of the tax deed. One of the things that we're looking to get involved in the process is the property owner whose property is seized has a period of time in which they can try and reclaim their property. However, there is a judicial procedure, an actual lawsuit in effect, which can allow the county to preclude that option for them. That allows us as a county to sell the property or gift the property or whatever we end up doing with the property without any concern that the prior owner is going to come back and sue us to regain the property. That's come up a number of times since I've started here, and that's where we are with a number of these properties. Any questions?
Okay, any questions for Mr. Wendell? It looks like we had several attachments. I'm not sure if you were, if I wasn't quite following along with any of the documents. I was more just listening. I'm not sure if you
Yeah,
wanted
I
to say
don't.
anything about
I don't
those.
necessarily have those documents. I see what is being shared on the screen, but I mean, I can go through the various ones if you think that would be helpful.
No, not necessarily. Maybe whoever put the documents on, if they could just explain what those are and just give us a brief overview. Is that you, Mr. Even?
That was me.
Okay, go ahead. Good hand off to you then.
Alrighty, so this was a document that Treasurer Keller had developed to track the status of the tax deed properties that she was working on. And this is just a continuation of those same properties. Since the last meeting that she provided an update, I believe in October, the following changes have happened. All of the properties that are now under the properties awaiting certified mailings and returns from certified mailing or sheriff service were previously under the Corp Council review category. And all 5 of those properties have been sent their certified mailings as of last week. We have had some receipts come through. However, we have to receive all receipts back before we can begin our 90-day process. I predict at least 1 or 2 of them we will not receive any back, or we will receive the letter back as undeliverable, which we will then have to take additional actions as far as possible sheriff service or the end-all be-all publication on public our website or the newspaper. Currently, Timothy Crook, that property, we have just received the affidavit of due diligence from Attorney Wendell. I can begin to move forward filling out the appropriate forms to forward that on to the county clerk for the county board to begin taking action on. As far as the others, properties on hold awaiting information, I have not touched those. You can see Julie had a note that states awaiting affidavit from Ben. That was our previous corp counsel, so that obviously we're probably not getting an affidavit from him anymore. But other than that, the properties awaiting from title work from the company, I reached out to Mark at Southwest Title, and he said that he would try to get back to me. With the nature of the real estate market right now, he said that this kind of became a back burner task for him as well. I do intend on creating a more simplified, I guess, list to go off of, but for right now, it is my opinion that I'm going to continue the way things that Treasurer Keller had done until we can get through the process as it is. I know that there were grumblings before this, I shouldn't say grumblings, but discussion about possibly switching our process. And again, I'm willing to look at that in the future, but right now I believe we should stick with the technique that Treasurer Keller had established with these properties, as she had already begun the process with them.
Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
I wasn't aware of us wanting to make a change. Can you fill me in on that? Or I've
So-
forgotten.
And Attorney Wendell can discuss this more, but there are 2 methods for foreclosing on tax properties: the NREM process that he is more familiar with, and then there's the tax deed that we currently employ. There are pros and cons to both, and to be honest with you, I don't know enough about it yet to really take a stand.
Can I jump in here just a sec?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So there are the 2 processes, as just said. I intend on informing this committee and or the greater board as to the differences of the 2 of them. However, I agree with Treasurer Even. I wanted to go through the tax deed process with the properties already in front of us. that way, one, they would be done in accordance with the way things have always been done, but then also I would have a direct experiential comparison that I could add to any, statutory explanation as to the difference of the two. So I will elaborate on that further. It's on my list to do, but I want to get through this process before I make any recommendations.
Okay,
Okay, anyone else with questions or comments?
Mr. Chair,
Who is that?
it's Jason,
Oh,
Economic
Mr.
Development.
Glassbrenner. Yes, go ahead.
So I've been one that's been requesting a review of this policy pretty much since I started because of dealing with the tax deed process here in Richland Center. And of course, we also dealt with the tax deed process in CAS on a property. Both of those instances resulted in an opportunity where I think the lots being able to be given to those municipalities has the potential for spurring on economic development. The challenge that has arisen for myself and for Attorney Wendell and Clint is that the tax deed process that we currently execute requires that you move through a process where you are basically suing an individual to remove their right to contest the process. So if I understand that correctly, and Attorney Wendell can correct me, that's different than the redeeming process. The tax deed process has a period of time throughout the process where an owner can say, look, I want to redeem this. I want to redeem this. I'm sorry I let this process go on so long. I want to redeem it, which basically means there's an agreement where he comes in and he pays the money that's required to re-free the land from the process. The challenge that we're having is that we make it through the redeeming period as required by the state statute, but there's still an element called a period, if I'm stating it right, Attorney Wendell, it's a period of a right to contest. In other words, it's no longer in their right to redeem the property. They've foregone that right by missing all of the notices and not responding. However, they can come back to us and say, look, you didn't notice it properly, and even though we've been in this process for a year or two, I'm going to sue you because you didn't honor the process. Well, what that does is anytime that you're trying to convey the land to a new owner from the county to any new owner, whether it's a municipality or a private owner, it leaves on the property a statutory requirement where that previous owner can sue the county for not handling the process correctly. And it doesn't allow the land to be able to be used as collateral. So if it goes through a title search or the bank search on the property, they look at that and they say, we're not going to lend you any money on that property because there's a statutory right of the former owner to contest that the county failed to do the process properly. The in rem process moves you through a simultaneous process that the right of redemption and the right to contest run in parallel. And when you're done with an in rem process, the land is owned by the county free and clear without any opportunity for the owner to say, even though, again, we've been through this process for 2 years, we want to sue you now because we don't think you did the process right. So it is a substantial issue in my mind with regard to economic development, whether that is because land is exchanged between the county and a municipality, or the land is passed off through an auction to a private individual because of the restrictions that remain in place after the process.
And just to follow up on that, we have had issues with that right of recovery, right to sue, in that my predecessor did not believe it necessary to go through the proceeding to protect against those kinds of suits until, I guess, an issue arose very early on in meeting Director Glassbrenner. We discussed that those two things should be done in tandem so that it precludes this issue. I would say, broad terms, a tax deed can be done through the office of the clerk, The in rem process is actually a judicial process, and so it would involve going before a judge. There's still a process to it, but it is final in a way that the tax deed process is not.
Well, I have to admit that almost 100% of this is over my head. I'm not sure about everyone else on the committee. We might need like a flow chart or something to understand how the process works now and what the proposal is to change it. But I do remember talking to Treasurer Keller, former Treasurer Keller, at one point, and I think one of her concerns was making sure that we were treating property taxpayers fairly. I don't know if that has anything to do with this, but another thing that, I know Supervisor Gentis had brought up before, wanting some updates on like the motel property on US Highway 14. I think that aligns with, the goals of Mr. Glassbrenner and his efforts at economic development. We don't want properties sitting around, falling apart and being an eyesore on our communities. And then also, from my point of view, I think tax fairness, making sure that all of our property taxpayers are paying into the pot, and how can we move some of these along while treating the property taxpayers fairly, the ones who are paying and the ones who aren't, to give them a chance to get caught up. So I think big picture, that's my thinking. We just need to get these taxes coming in and get properties redeveloped and treat everyone fairly in the process. So hopefully we can see some movement on some of these now that both Mr. Wendell and Treasurer Even, you're getting familiar with the job, and hopefully we can get some of these back on the tax roll. Mr. Brewer?
May I comment that actually the current process is light years ahead of what we used to do, which was basically nothing. Things just seemed to churn along and nothing ever happened. So we've done a lot. Maybe we can do it better.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you for that. Yeah, Mr. Seep?
may I ask whomever if there are properties that are tied up because they're being contested because they were not closed out through the court or whatever the case may be, how many are there that are in abeyance?
If you're referring to the 2-year look back period, to be honest, I don't know. As I said, my predecessor did not care to undertake the process of getting those titles cleared. I know I have personally resolved one. I have had contact regarding another one, but no further follow-up. But theoretically, any of the properties that have been subjected to the tax deed process in the last 2 years, I would say, have the potential for this to come around and become an issue.
I see. Over the years, I do not recall anyone contesting those transactions, but perhaps there have been. But you're saying that if it's a court-ordered deal, it's no longer a problem.
Correct. The issue is not the contestation itself. If somebody ignores all of the notices that go out before the tax deed process has gone through, I think it's highly unlikely that they'll turn around in the tail end and try and sue at that point. However, as Director Glassbrenner brought up, just having that possibility existing does encumber the property, which restricts its ability to be used as collateral. From a bank or lender's point of view, you don't wholly own the property. It is not marketable title. It's not free and clear of any encumbrance. And that situation exists until the title is cleared, which requires a judicial process.
Yes, I know in the case of one property, the notices were sent, the sheriff went out to contact them, and there were notices sent over a year. Finally, the delinquent taxpayer contacted the county and signed off on it. Though I don't know whether that went, I'm talking about the Casanova case. I don't know whether that went through a court or not, but it seemed to be finalized.
If it's the one I'm thinking of where then it was transferred to the municipality,
Yeah.
I believe it did go through the tax deed process. I am not sure as to whether or not the encumbrance on title still exists. I've not been contacted regarding that. So if there's a problem with that one, I don't know about it, but
Well, could we find out if there is an encumbrance on that title?
yeah, I would just need to know when the tax deed was issued. I can follow up on that on the tail end.
Yeah, I think that's a loose end that should be tied up.
Okay, any other comments or questions from committee members? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wendell and Treasurer Even, for taking the time to be with us today and answer some questions, and we'll look forward to more updates and hopefully some action on some of these properties. And Treasurer Even, if you could, I didn't see these materials on the website, if you could contact MIS to have those posted, just in case anyone else wants to look at those, that would be great. We can see them on our iPads, just not the committee's website. So, okay. And we didn't need to take any action on this one, did we? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 6, purchase of Spillman Geo Validation Upgrade with Mapping Update, MIS and Sheriff. Mr. Langer.
Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to purchase a geo validation upgrade for Spillman module at the cost of $31,326.03. Background on this item is Richland County 911 system uses Spillman for their CAD RMS. This requires a mapping to dispatch officers and emergency responders correctly. We have not purchased the upgrade maps at the cost, as the cost was too high. We have now discovered that we can no longer update the CAD system until we implement, and then we now need this the geo validation module in order to do that. So I will try to layman explain what it is, and then I would defer to the Sheriff Porter, Director Scott. But essentially, the CAD module system ties in from the 911 calls coming in. Right now, we have multiple setups to try to piecemeal them from a call coming in to hit the right GIS mapping so that dispatchers can communicate out to folks. And this module helps bring it together, and it also facilitates, I think, for us to be able to do some updates as some other systems are unsupported. I think Jason's also grabbing a microphone that can probably better explain the details on it.
Okay,
Sure.
And I'm sorry to jump back, but Mr. Even, I was in the wrong folder before. I was looking at a previous month where we had other documents in there. So there were no other documents that anyone was missing. So I'm sorry, I caused confusion on that one. So Sheriff Porter, should we hand it off to you to start?
Yeah, sure. If we want to work around and kind of.
Okay, great. Mr. Marshall, go ahead.
So basically, this is the actual mapping for Spillman. It's a little bit of a separate piece from the 911 directly, but as we move forward with Spillman and its updates, they had an older platform that had mapping built into Spillman that's no longer supported. It's moved over to an ArcGIS platform, which will take some involvement from the zoning office, as we'll essentially be taking real-time mapping from the ArcGIS server that's currently there, adding another server, and then Spillman will actually be able to use that same data. They've implemented some new call taker screens and different things that we're not able to actually use at this time because the platform that we're on is end of life and no longer supported.
Okay, yep, Mr. Brewer. Oh, does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Luck.
I actually meant to ask this during the LEJC meeting and then I didn't. My question is how did we not know this was coming? if this was a surprise to us that this was going to happen, or have we known that this was eventually going to happen and just didn't get it on our radar to, like, say, during the budget process last year?
We've known that this has been coming for quite some time. Previous administration was aware of it, and I do not know why it never actually got to law enforcement committee to actually address it and budget for it. Sheriff Porter now and has been aware of it and is getting brought to you guys now.
If I can caveat on that, on how we hope to remedy going forward, discussions that I've had with Director Scott and with Sheriff Porter is firming up some of our countywide tech items and making sure that they're appropriately kind of indicated through a finance policy on what expenditures hit what fund. And we have kind of these crossover type things when it hits a 911 outlay. It's kind of who's the authority and who's in control on ensuring that the different pieces are budgeted for. We have an overlay and a working relationship between MIS and the Sheriff's Office on ensuring that licensing and new pieces are being brought to the table and accounted for. And we're hoping to further clear that up with a countywide tech type of a fund and a little bit more detail on what's all going through a 911 outlay fund or a dispatch fund going forward. Conversation's also very appropriate as we build now a preparation for a radio tower project and how all those pieces are going to fit in the viewed expenses with the maintenance and upkeep on that system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, follow-up?
Yep, go ahead.
So Fund 93, remind me, is that the 911 outlay?
That is not. The request today is for utilization of ARPA funds, which is our one-time type of funds, utilizing it against our lost revenue. Understanding that this is a $31,000 increase for this year, 2022 budget, we're going to have to accommodate in operational funds moving forward next year to the tune of, for a Spillman, I think it's is it a 4% increase each year? We just talked about it about 2 hours ago. Is that correct? 4% increase on this cost going forward each year, going forward to build into our operational budget.
So this 31,000 is for a service contract that each year will pay this the same, or 4% more. That's what so this is not a one-time purchase.
This is a one-time purchase, but there will be additional maintenance costs that'll go along with it. That'll be a yearly expense.
We're basically going to be paying for support on the Esri licensing software, which may need to be incorporated in and wrapped up with zoning versus them paying separate licenses. Do more of a site license for the county may be a cost savings. It looks like Steve had a question on CAD RMS. So CAD is basically computer-aided dispatch, and RMS is for the record management system.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Luck, are you finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Gentis, go ahead.
So, so it's 4% of that every year? Is that what you meant?
It's a 4% increase on the Spillman Esri license, which is
So the support on Spillman is 29,000.
29,000.
On that every year, which is
It's a $29,000 license this year, 2022, and then it'll be a 4% increase each year going forward.
But we're not doing the 29, it's 4% of the 29. That's what you said, it's not a it's a one time, that's what we're confused about.
This module is a one-time cost for this specific module of 29 or for 31,000 or whatever it is. The 29,000 is a yearly maintenance cost on all of the modules we own. There's probably 15, 20 modules that are all together.
And so,
And that 29,000 cost would have an increase each year. That is just part of Motorola's ongoing maintenance.
so we've had that cost in the past.
Yes, that
Yeah.
cost is existing. I apologize for confusing the matter.
So had this been budgeted for, where would it have been budgeted? What fund number? I've got the the report open from the last meeting. Would this be Fund 58, 911 capital projects?
That is
Yeah,
correct.
that would probably be an accurate place for where we would have put the funds for it had we budgeted for it.
Okay, and then because we're now doing with this approval of this today, then I wasn't quite following all the back and forth here, but there will be a maintenance cost on this specific Spillman product.
Each module of Spillman, there's a maintenance and licensing fee for. So this would, have its own maintenance and licensing fee that would come year. It would come yearly.
560 a year. Okay, so that helps because I was thinking it was making it sound like I was thinking you all meant 29,000 a year. So I'm like, what now? Okay, okay. Okay, so today we're being asked to approve this purchase using ARPA funds because it wasn't budgeted for in the 2022 adopted budget.
Correct.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion to approve this?
I will make that motion, Mr. Chairman, and could I ask at the same time that somehow the volume be adjusted upward?
We'll just remind everyone to speak closer into their mics.
That
and then
would
I'm
be
sure-
helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And then, so we've got a motion by Seep.
And I'll second it, but I'd like to have a running total of our getting lost.
Okay, so a second by Gentis, and then we actually have that on the agenda under agenda item number 9, is it?
That's correct. 9 and 10, we do have another shot at our tracker for our ARPA funds as well as kind of a recommendation on how to visualize the use of that.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Agenda item number 7, purchase of a new Cisco switch MIS.
Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to purchase 2 Cisco 93,000 L24 port switches with redundant power supplies and stacking kits with licensings from JCOM Technologies at the cost of $14,135.58 with funding to come from Fund 92. That's our short-term borrowing. This was included in apportionment in that. Richland County uses virtualized server platform. The traffic of the virtual server is run by redundant switches that must be maintained and ran 24/7. The current switches are end of life and need to be replaced. This is not a piece of equipment that can be allowed to die and then replace it, as it would cause massive downtime. In the 2022, a total of $20,000 was put into the borrowing for the items such as this in the county infrastructure, and this is an appropriate use of the funds, again, out of the Fund 92 short-term borrowing. Mr. Chair.
Okay, so my main question, I went back to the fund tracker for 92 for 2021. We went over this at the last meeting, and it shows that MIS is an approved amount of 20 grand, and none of that 2021 money has been spent. So why wouldn't we spend the 2021 money before we spend the 2022?
That's not tracked, right?
I'd have to.
All of it was spent.
So the report that we got last time wasn't accurate?
Missing on MIS. We'll have to check our apportionments on MIS for 2021.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come back and firm up our 2021 expenditures, but this would be out of 2022 short-term borrowing.
Okay, okay, understood. Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve this out of 2022's Fund 92 borrowing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we be authorized to purchase 2 Cisco 9001 L24 port switches with redundant power supplies and standing
Okay, Mr.
et
Seep,
cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
yep, we got it. We got a motion by Brewer and a second by Seep. Any further discussion on this one? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Agenda item number 8, Fund 75 capital borrowing appropriation for new mower at the fairgrounds.
Mr. Chair, looking today to motion to utilize Fund number 75 apportionment from Fairgrounds apportionment to purchase of a lawnmower not to exceed $15,000. Will require a resolution through County Board. Richland County Fair and Recycling Committee is requesting utilization of Fund 75 funds for the purchase of a new lawnmower. The committee will be meeting on February 2nd to take action to recommend resolution to County Board from 4 different proposals. And this would be, again, reapportionment of Fund 75, money that I think was initially borrowed for lights and grandstand, if memory serves. Mr. Chair.
Okay, so here we have a current balance, if this one's right, of $68,000. So this would be continuing to spend that money that's still sitting there down. So looking for a motion to approve that.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, that was Mr. Cooey?
Yes.
Okay, motion by Cooey.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll do a second by Turk.
Question,
Yep, go ahead, Mr. Seep.
the purchase is for a $50,000 more? Is this a
15.
tractor?
1-5.
Oh,
15.
$15,000.
Yep,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Oh, okay. I withdraw my question.
Good question. Those two numbers sound alike.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
we've had this discussion before, whether the county mower could be used or something. And I know they said it was impossible. I was just thinking about the campus mowers. I mean, there's just so many mowers, but I'm just making a statement. I know that they don't like that.
And you're talking about the highway department mowers.
Well, the highway or the county, we have a lot of mowers in our county system. Consolidate things. I still can't understand why we can't consolidate that.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions? Okay, all those. Oh, yeah, Mr. Brewer.
Well, Mr. Cooley made the motion, or,
Yep, Mr. Cooey did make the motion.
so may I ask him a question?
Go ahead.
Mark, are you on Parks?
No, I'm on highway, not parks.
Okay, so did you guys discuss this at Highway about, I think it has been discussed there, I can recall it being discussed there, about using highway mower over at the fairgrounds?
Yes, it was discussed.
And why can't we?
Yeah, if my memory, for whatever reason, highway was mowing it. And by the time we got done mowing it, it was costing more than if they had their own mower, I think is what it worked out to be, Marty.
I could add to that. Mr. Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Seep, go ahead.
if I may add to Mr. Cooey's remarks, that's a cumbersome thing from our experience. We talked about that at other facilities, about the courthouse and human services, and having the highway department take care of things. It's a scheduling problem. They have a work schedule. It can't always fit in, and it just doesn't coordinate well, and it is not cost effective. We talked about having the highway department mow the parks. They need a certain amount of independence and autonomy and control over when they're going to mow and who's going to mow it. And I agree with the notion of having their own mower. Highway's got enough to do.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. I think I didn't hear very many people, so I think we need to do a roll call vote. I can't tell if people are in support of this or not. So, Ms. Wheelock, would you mind doing a roll call vote for us?
No particular order because I don't have a listing.
That's okay. You just create the order and then keep track of it in case we do more roll calls later.
Lopez,
Aye.
Hui,
Aye.
Brewer,
Aye.
Gentis, nay. Turk,
Is that? Aye.
Luck,
Aye.
Seep,
I like Mr. Cooey's motion.
did I get everyone?
You did. Did you get, how many votes did you have, any?
6 yes, 1 no.
Okay, so that motion carries. All right, thank you for that, everyone. Agenda item number 9, American Rescue Plan Final Rule Administrator.
Mr. Chair, this will be items 9 and 10 on your agenda, combined into one summary here. Two bits, potential motion coming from this is motion to accept report and direct the county administrator to move forward with utilizing remaining public sector lost revenue apportionment as county contingency fund to cover potential operational gaps until balances in expenditures can be reached through prioritizing services. So there's kind of two bits to it. The first part I'm going to explain is going to be the final ruling on your ARPA funds. We've been operating off the interim ruling. The second part will be then recommendation on guidance for use of those funds. So American Rescue Plan Act had its final ruling released several weeks back. The executive summary, some of the changes are kind of listed out there, including public health and negative impacts. The ones that really kind of to hone into for discussions that we've had is kind of in the premium pay. Through the final ruling, essentially all county employees are considered essential. With the interim ruling, I think it was still all kind of directed towards folks providing healthcare types of services had that definition of essential. And of course, that was different from even the American, the previous bill to that. So the final ruling for ARPA funds for essential encompasses all county employees. The other part of it then is with lost revenues. We were operating on a formula provided to us with Wisconsin Counties Association on how to calculate our lost revenues. They came out and kind of said all governments, municipalities, and counties, you can kind of do a standard deduction and assume if you're at a $10 million or loss, that you can claim all of the ARPA funds as lost revenues. The lost revenues type of a categorization allows for the maximum flexibility for counties to use those funds for anything at their discretion, provided that it's not going specifically towards a special type of a pension plan, and you cannot use it to reduce any types of levy taxation. So those are really the only two limits of it. So as we talked about with the formula and our apportionment type of motions that we made on apportioning it, it kind of more firms up that all the entire amount of our ARPA funds can be utilized as a lost revenue with maximum discretion at the county's need. The other part of it that kind of impacts us too included a broad range of water, sewer, broadband infrastructure, with also then kind of talking on the stormwater management projects, which as we've kind of marched down the trail of obligation to use it for the ditch drainage project and that local share part of that for the inclusion of that project. And it would all kind of fall underneath lost revenue, but they kind of further define the water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. So as you remember, the Finance and Personnel Committee did take action to have appropriations of 10%, 10%, 10%, 20%, 50% for the categories below, with a 0% for the blue one. So we have 10% portion for public health and response, 10% for negative economic impacts, of which we've kind of used now to apportion out for our child care and education grants, which I think we have one more check to distribute out, and then we'll be monitoring for compliance on expenditures. Premium pay us for essential workers was a 10% appropriation. Do keep in mind now that that current apportionment is expanded to all county employees potentially. The water sewer infrastructure, we had 20%. Currently, we have apportioned but not expended funds towards UW Extension broadband survey, of which I'll report on later, as well as have an earmarked. We haven't finalized it yet as we wait for the federal government to come back on the airport project. Then we have public sector lost revenues where we've taken actions to appropriate for MIS staff support, historic roof project, codifying and digitizing our JAMP Pro subscriptions that we took action on last month, as well as data policy and content filtering last month that we'll have to include in there once the expenditures are reached. And then also including in there then our Spillman geo-validation upgrades against that total of 1.7 or 1.675. So it is my recommendation that as we're building now this, our capital improvements plan for the next 5 years, and as we're building our financial operations for the next 5 years, that this body, this committee, kind of start visualizing your lost revenue as a section of your contingency fund to help bridge gaps until we can get a balance in expenditures through our prioritization of services. When we're taking actions, they often come with pushing the ceiling up and have carried over financial impacts on the levy. So until we can get to a point where we have our expenses matched by county levy and other types of revenue flows, it is my recommendation that the lost revenues section of your apportionment can be visualized for that fill gap versus previous conversations of trying to use it for one time, once in a generation types of projects or something of that nature. That is my report to you today. Again, looking for action language, if seen fit, to accept the report and direct county administrator to move forward with utilizing remaining public sector loss revenue apportionment as a contingency fund to help cover potential operational gaps. Bill balance and expenditures can be reached through prioritizing services. And what I visualize with this action is that while we're building out the financial plan, then that is kind of seated in that in the decision worksheet as a fund available to offset expenditure costs, and until we reach a balanced levy to expenditure. Mr. Chair.
Okay, any questions or comments for Mr. Langrecht?
Well, I
A
have
very good recommendation.
some questions.
Okay, Mr. Brewer, go ahead.
How much have we spent or designated for expenditure under ARPA?
We have our tracker up here that thank you again provided by our county supervisor, Tammy. So far with actual expenditures and checks released, we're at $260,000 and change for the child and education grant. And then we did the movement for the premium pay for Pine Valley. So we only have 372-ish, 73-ish that's actually expended, but appropriated then or portioned we've already got on the docket for the historic roof at 280, 25,000 for the codification, 10,000 cover our MIS staff for this year, an additional 10,000 between JAMF and data, and now a 30,000 for our Spillman system.
Which would leave how much then available?
You're looking at about 1.1, I would say, off a fast guess. I can calculate it out.
Well,
Of lost, of public sector lost revenue. And so your other ones too with water, sewer, broadband, the reason it's there is self-imposed. I mean, that's there because we voted to have it as an apportionment, but you have $670,000 there, 8,000 currently earmarked for the broadband survey. We did at one time, we had a project with Laval and in doing that Casanova project, but the grant didn't work out. There's still an apportionment there as well as your other ones up here that currently apportioned for these purposes. But again, with the ability to put this higher amount into lost revenue and have discretionary uses for it, that's a decisions yet that can be made to change these.
Maybe I'm wondering, Mr. Brewer, if they added a column that said appropriations also, and totaled those up, we could see what our appropriations and the spent amount is together. And then that would be then it'd be easier to see how much left do we have to spend. Would that help?
I have another question though. And I know why this money was made available, and I know that we've diligently explored ways to spend it and use it. I'm wondering why in all of this, there can't be funds available for the tower project.
I can answer that to the extent that legally, and there's no reason that you can't, other than, again, that takes away from the recommendation today on trying to use that as a gap going forward into the next few years' budgets on trying to preserve services until we're able to firmly prioritize and decide which ones we may want to do without or find other revenues to fill those services. So
We're looking at possible borrowing for the tower project, so.
So if we pass this motion today, would you still be coming forward to the Finance and Personnel Committee for approval to spend ARPA money out of the public sector or lost revenue category or not?
Yes, I wouldn't plan on spending monies out of that fund. I would still want control from the committee here, so it doesn't become a runaway. You gave your oldest son the checkbook and now he's off to the races kind of a thing by any means. But what I would be doing, like I said, is when we're building out that financial planning, I would be including that amount as a contingency as we try to project forward on what our expenses are and how much of a fund availability we have there to fill gaps until, again, we can prioritize and reduce necessary expenditures or find some other types of revenues to balance out our future budgets.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Let's go Supervisor Luck and then Mr. C.
So Administrator Langrick, do we have any proposals for spending or what we want to use like the public health response allocation on? Or the rest of our premium pay for essential workers fund, or even the broadband water sewer fund? Do we have proposals of what we potentially would do with that money? Because you're proposing to leave those categories alone and you're just talking about the last one is being put into the contingency fund, correct?
Correct. Today I'm just talking about the public sector lost revenue accounts. The other ones are still apportionments that are there to be adjusted, but they were established by actions of the committee to have those apportioned out for those purposes.
Right. So do we have any plans? Has anyone come forward with ideas on how to spend money in those categories?
Yes, I do. I don't have the list with me. I had it in a previous tracker version. I can bring that back to the committee as well.
Okay, thank you.
Good, Mr. C.
I didn't hear Mr. Brewer's question. I think it was relevant to funding for the tower.
Yes,
Yes, he was wondering if ARPA money could be used to fund the radio tower project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brewer. Good question.
I'd say, I am personally, I'm a little hesitant about the motion because I just think it extends out our issues further. It allows us to keep kicking the can down the road, and I would rather your financial plan is a 10-year financial plan. And so how many years would we be using this public sector lost revenue to basically not make some efficiency decisions that we probably need to be making? That's my concern about it.
I can't disagree with those concerns. I can say that the limits on expenditure for ARPA funds, I believe, stretches to 2025. But I would see it kind of if we're going to, and again, we're not there yet, but I'm looking down the road. If we're going to be separating from a services and we're going to be as an example, if we're going to be saying ambulance, you're going to form your own type of a district now, to be able to give as much advance notice for those services, if we can continue a relationship for a year or for 2 years, and for any type of service that we'd be considering for it, to fill that gap, to give them the best opportunity to find other types of funding sources, or to be able to do a fair and just kind of a step down, phase out type of a process to end those services and to liquidate the assets, is kind of where my mind thought is. But again, we haven't crossed those decision bridges on when or if and what is potentially going to be reduced.
Well, that makes more sense to me, to use it for something like that, but to just use it for, oh, we didn't budget for this, or this just happened, to continue to do that, it doesn't seem to be a good use of the money in my mind, to keep doing that over and over and over again. I understand emergencies come up, but I'm just trying to think about, how are we going to prepare ourselves for the year 2026?
Mr. Chairman,
that's my hesitation. Mr. Seep?
your assumption is correct. Emergencies do come up, and they're often unexpected and surprises. And I think there's some wisdom to providing for some rainy day sort of cushion for the future. Is just a matter of prudence. It's going to happen. Our history is such that we lots of surprises come up. I think it's good to have a rainy day fund.
Okay, does someone want to make this motion? The motion is to accept the report and direct the county administrator to move forward with utilizing this public sector lost revenue apportionment as a county contingency fund.
I'd make the motion.
Okay, motion by Turk.
I'll second. Smart.
Second by Cooey. Second by Cooey. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yep, Mr. Turk, go ahead.
I've been critical of our shortcomings in long-term planning fiscally for a while now. And while I share your concern about this not being just a piggy bank that we can steal money out of, if we are in fact, setting it aside with the intention of this is going to be what helps bridge us to our more ongoing fiscal responsibility, I'm good with that. While we could use it for things like the tower project, we have the ability to borrow for the tower project. We're not saying we determined that's, the be all and end all of funding it, but this can be used to pay for things that we can't borrow for. So it has much more flexibility in that way. And so I like being able to set it aside and use it for those purposes that can ease us through that transition, which no matter how we do it, certainly will be painful, but this might help with some of that.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Turk. Anyone else?
Well, just to comment on borrowing, we already have the highest per capita borrowing according to the Green Book of any county in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, anyone else?
Good logic.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
Oh,
Okay, let's take a roll call on this one, please. And if you could just rotate, so the first person you started with, that would be me. I would go last this time, just in the rotating rule.
Seep,
Aye.
Luck,
Aye.
Turk,
Aye.
Gentis,
Aye.
Brewer,
so
Cooey,
Aye.
Lopez,
No. Okay, so it sounds like we have 5 in favor and 2 against, so that motion carries.
may I comment? It's nice being on Sean's side of an issue here.
Yes, we agree on this one, although Mr. Turk made a good argument, but I still decided to vote no because anyway.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Cooey, go ahead.
I got to step off. I got another call I got to get on.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here. Okay,
I hope we
let's go
don't
to
incur
agenda-
the wrath of the two chairs.
Okay, let's go to agenda item number 11, county statistics on compensations, benefits, retention, and COLA projections administrator.
Mr. Chair, looking today for a motion to accept report in context of the end of year reports regarding compensation, benefits, and retention, and in context of recent proposals for the use of ARPA funds we just discussed. And following information is provided to help Finance and Personnel Committee understand elements of our employee compensation and benefit costs through the county. The report also indicates our 2021 retention performance. As the report indicates, we experienced 138 new hires, 137 terminations, and had 27 employees who were both hired and separated in the same 2021 year. These trends draw attention to our county's compensation package and call to question what actions are underway or being considered in the near future to help control county turnover. As the administrator, my response are as follows. Recent actions: Richland County recently moved forward with roughly a 7% increase to general employees, 9% increase to Pine Valley employees. Health and Human Services Board has made recommendations for premium pay and commitment to further define wage, salary progression, and cost of living considerations. And we'll talk about that. That's the next agenda item coming up. So this is kind of premises that. Actions in February, as scheduled with our financial planning, we intend to review our current employee benefits package. Scheduled with our financial planning as well, we intend to poll Richland County employees with a survey to gather information on preference, priorities regarding compensation, benefits, paid time off, etc., that would encourage retention. Actions intended for March, reviewing previous financial commitments to include progression on the Carlson-Detman wage schedule to reach benchmark values, along with discussion on consideration for COLA adjustments to wage schedule to help foster competitiveness. I will be reapproaching this committee in March, again, kind of talking on the points of we had Pine Valley move 2 steps and general employees move 1 step, looking to potentially reverse that going forward into the next year. And then also an understanding with our COLA increases, the influx of monies that kind of came out and our economic situation, we're looking at potential COLA increases that could be around 5% to keep up with the state CPI. So things to consider. Also consideration for the county's health insurance package and movement to the ETF plan. The state plan will be the first hurdle. If we're not in favor of that, then the follow-on conversations are we happy with our broker, our current plan, and our plan designs? Discussion of possible action also on changes in employee paid time off accrual rates and timing, which was the discussion we had, I believe, last month as well. So those are things that are intended for March. The chart then is listed there below that kind of breaks down, and thank you to Tammy Hendrickson, who I don't know if she's listening from Germany, but thank you, Tammy, for putting these together. She's on her first week-long vacation, I think, and possibly her employment with us here at the county. So good to see her out and about, but she produced these for us prior to leaving. The bottom left-hand corner is kind of what we were queuing in on earlier with recruitment and retention. And you can see some of the other financial expenses, again, that go towards wages and compensations. Oh, I'm not sharing. Then you're not seeing anything. There we go. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm sharing. There we go. It's probably
This
crazy.
is the 3rd page of the
Down.
document
there.
under agenda item number 11.
There we go. Number 11.
Scroll down.
And so on the bottom left there, you see our new hires, our terminations, our hireds and quits in the same year. It's broken down then by the payrolls that we issue. Across the top, you'll see our different withholdings, taxes, union dues, and such. On the bottom right, then you'll see our benefited time and payouts. And that is what I know. I've had discussion with Director Thorson as well. This is kind of put on here to, I hope not to intentions of undercutting proposal coming forth by Health and Human Services Board, but at the same time letting the Finance and Personnel Committee understand where the county is in a situation prior to hearing the petition from the Health and Human Services Board. Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I have quite a few comments or thoughts on this. I remember a few years ago when this was first being brought forward from the clerk's office that, you know, we had an alarming number of people moving on from county employment. This is really nice, and I appreciate what your office pulled together to show some actual numbers behind it, since we've never seen this. I was curious because this is in the news so much lately about how many people are moving on to different jobs. Well, what's the average for, you know, a similar industry in the government industry? So I did a little research this morning. I sent this to you, Mr. Langer. You probably saw the email. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States shows that between 2016 and 2019, each year, an average of 18 to 19% of government employees, there was a turnover. In 2020, it went up to 24%, which makes sense with COVID. They don't have 2021 numbers available yet. So I just took the number down below. Can't remember if I chose, it didn't matter. I chose 138, I think. New hires. I divided that by the number of people who get W-2s at the county, and that number came to 22%. So to me, it doesn't seem as alarming when it gets put in context. Now, there are some strange things. I don't totally understand this chart because we did the staff authorization chart several months ago, and I looked back in our files and I found all that. I found the total number of employees for under each department. Now, these included, you know, regular, full-time, regular, part-time, limited term, reserve, call-in, seasonal, and contract lease. Those are our 5 categories of employees. I don't know how county board has so many people working for it. I'm assuming this has to do with maybe people who are getting per diems and serving on different committees, commissions, or boards. Because we only have 21 members and it shows something like 62 W-2s going out. So that's why the chart's a little confusing to me in a way, but in other ways it does make a lot of sense, and you can get a lot of information out of this. So I took numbers for basically the turnover in 2021. I divided by the total number of employees in that staff authorization chart. And and some of these figures might not be totally accurate. You know, I understand we're just trying to figure out what to look for, but Pine Valley, 56 people leaving out of 160, that's 35% turnover. Simons was 20 out of 57, that's also 35%. The Sheriff's Department was 10 out of 54, so that's 19%. Highway was 6 out of 36, that's 17%. And HHS was 19 out of 92. Ms. Thorson can probably correct me if that number is not right, but that's what's on our staff authorization chart, at least. That was 21%. I know her number later she's going to talk about is 28%. So anyway, obviously we want to retain employees and we don't want much turnover. And I think it's great to be reducing the turnover, but I also don't think we should always feel so terrible about ourselves comparing to a lot of other government agencies. So I just wanted to share that with folks.
Can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have 54 employees. I have 38. So it's the number's closer to 30% for my department for 2021.
Well, the interesting thing though is that your department in this chart is listed as having 50 W-2s going out.
But that's people throughout the year. That's total number of W-2s, not employees at a given time.
If anybody that was employed in the calendar year would be entitled to a W-2 or was on payroll for a calendar year.
Got it.
So.
Okay, that makes sense. Where I got the 54 number was actually from that staff authorization chart. And this is something we looked at last year. So that's why I'm just not quite understanding all the numbers. I'm seeing you have, let's see, 33 regular full-time, and then you have 21 reserve, call-in, seasonal.
Yes, I think in the staff authorization, I think we were trying to allow for kind of like a bullpen of available seats that you would have for call-in and reserve to have sit out there. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're coming in hours, but that they would be allowed to.
And a lot of them aren't filled at this point, so
But some of those would be getting W-2s, I'm assuming.
they
too.
would, yes. The
Right,
ones
so
that are
that's
filled.
why I don't think we can just use regular full-time employees as the comparison here, because, we're looking at, the way that this is listed out in this chart, we got 612 W-2s going out, and those aren't all people who left this. That doesn't quite, it just doesn't add up is what I'm saying. So I just think that sometimes the problem looks worse than it is. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but I just think we got to look at this in the context of the greater picture here, instead of feeling like we're always doing such a terrible job, or things are so terrible here at Richland County.
Well, if you look at Simon, those must be many part-time people. There's only 2 full-time people working.
Yes, that's another good example. Fair would be another good example. 31 W-2s going out, but we only have 1 full-time person working there. So some departments are going to be really heavy on the part-time or whatever, contract, lease, reserve, call in. But yeah. So does anyone else have any questions or thoughts on this? I just think we need to be careful about these numbers and using them to show that things are bad. Don't know that they show that things are as bad as we're always told.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I would just comment, I agree. And I don't think we're unique in any way. I mean, turnover is happening everywhere. This is not unique to Richland County in any way.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
It's
is that-
Jason at Economic Development. Could I share an idea?
Sure, go ahead.
So prior to coming back to Richland Center, I spent a couple of years in a human resource firm. And while the numbers may not reflect an out of balance ratio of turnover, it is widely discussed in human resource terms that an employee turnover can cost your firm or your company roughly a full year's salary. So it is something that can be looked at, to your point, from many different angles, but one of them in the human resource profession is that it is very expensive to hire an employee, try to train them, and then lose them partway through and have to do the process all over again. So that
Yes,
would
and
be, there should be.
I'm in no way saying that turnover doesn't cause problems, because I think it does, and I think we should be aiming to reduce our turnover numbers. I think that's a great goal, and no one would want to. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Mr. Seep.
Some of the service requirements of our various departments have some bearing on this. The highway department has, by necessity, a lot of part-time call-in and seasonal employees in the summer months for mowing roadsides, in the winter months for additional snow plowing and other emergencies. And the other one that's is typically problematic is the healthcare department. There is a lot of turnover there. It's very hard to retain people, and that is such a field requiring essential employees. And so there's they have a lot of call-ins, or they have some call-ins who come in as to fill in for both nursing and CNAs, but it's a real challenge to maintain that staffing. It's also the case in human services and law enforcement, more so, I suppose, than human services. They're both kind of human services uh, projects, but it is challenging for a county because we, we have a variety of services which require a lot of part-time or call-in folks, casual laborers, because of the nature of the beast itself. So it's a challenge for counties. We're going to have a lot of turnover, and of course we need to we maintain our service and our mission in terms of quality, and so we have that challenge of trying to retrain as many permanent people as we can. But a lot of it has to do with budgeting for these departments. They go to part-time and casuals and call-ins because they're trying to manage their budget and they're trying to save money in their budget. So sometimes we're sacrificing Peter to pay Paul.
Well, and I don't know about all the numbers, but like in the highway department, the staff authorization table we have shows we have 30 full-time people, 2 seasonal, and 4 reserve call-in. So that's,
Well,
I
how
mean,
many
6
W-2s do you have?
6 out of 36. So I'm just saying, I don't think that, yeah, if we had 6 people leave, we have 36 employees. I'm just not seeing the excessive turnover compared to the government-wide industry in the United States, at least with that. But I'm sure we'll learn more from, I mean, the departments are the experts on this. You know, you all know how many employees you have, and maybe the staff authorization table doesn't quite capture it, but it's just something I think we got to be looking at the numbers in a little bit more detail, and we can't just always imagine the worst. Okay, so does anyone want to make a motion to accept the reports, or should we move on? We don't have to, but we can if we choose. I'm a little hesitant.
I move that we accept the report.
Okay, motion by Seep.
I'll second.
Second by Turk. Any further discussion on that? I'm uncomfortable accepting it because I think I think we need more detail on it myself. Any other discussion? Okay,
Well, the option of not accepting it is to reject it. I don't think we want to do that either.
Right.
I don't think there's any reason to have a motion. We could just say that we'd like to have more detail, so we're not accepting or rejecting.
Well, that's why we're accepting it, so that there can be future action and discussion. Otherwise, if we reject it, it just goes on the shelf.
Well, we're not rejecting it. If you have a motion and we vote no, then we're rejecting it.
Could I amend the motion to ask that this be brought back for more information?
Okay, so that's a motion to amend by Luck to
I'll second that.
provide more information, and second by Gentis. Any further discussion on the motion to amend?
That's fine. I think that's the intent of the proponent.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion to amend carries. So now we have an amended motion to accept the report and return with further information. So all those in favor of that, any discussion on that amended motion first? All those in favor of that amended motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that carries, and I'm in favor of that too, so I think that's great. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item number 12, request for premium and policy commitment. Mr. Langreich.
Mr. Chair, looking for potentially two motions here today. First one, motion to approve providing $1 per hour premium pay to employee wages beginning the first pay period in February and ending December 31st, 2022. 2022 premium pay would end if the county implements a comprehensive wage study advancement plan. Forward this proposal to the county board for approval. Second item is motion to develop a comprehensive plan that includes annually making cost of living updates to the wage schedule, outlining a wage step advancement policy for county employees based on longevity, and authorizing the department head to place employees up to step 5 with county administrator authorized to approve higher placements. Today, Director Thorson is here to fill us in on the background on this. And then there was also a presentation that was uploaded into your folders and on the website that was presented to the Health and Human Services Board. I would turn it over to Director Thorson.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Turk.
I will be abstaining from discussion on this issue.
Oh, okay. We will ask Ms. Wheelock to note that in the minutes for today.
Great.
Go ahead, Ms. Orson.
Me okay? Am I coming?
Just get really close. Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. So this came about, yes, in December. I think one of the Health and Human Services Board members asked if we were considering doing some sort of incentive for retention after we were giving our personnel updates. Health and Human Services in 2021 experienced a 28% turnover rate with our staff. That's a loss of 18 staff. I think you had a different number than I did, but we lost a significant number of staff. In 2020, our turnover rate was 6%. I think we came back and presented a presentation that came forward to the Finance Committee last May or June. And at that time, we were thinking that we might experience an 8% turnover rate. And we were concerned at that point because we saw it ticking up. We did not anticipate it going up to 28%. That is the highest turnover rate that Health and Human Services has ever experienced. I think I have a slide in the presentation that we provided to the Health and Human Services Board that shows a 10-year history of our turnover. Thank you. So at the point that we gave a presentation in May, we had not even experienced the bulk of staff turnover. So we came forward to the Health and Human Services Board in January to try to come up with some sort of incentive for retaining our staff. So in doing that, what we did was kind of polled our staff. We did a brief 5-question survey that's in your information to find out what would be the most motivating for staff to stay with Health and Human Services. And ultimately, the focus was on the pay plan. I think staff were pretty appreciative of updating the whole wage scale by the 7%, but they're still concerned that there's not a plan for how staff will progress up to and eventually get to the market rate. So we focused on 2 things presenting to the Health and Human Services Board. One was the second motion that Mr. Langrecht read related to coming up with some sort of policy for how the wage scale would be updated on a regular basis, how staff would progress along the steps and make it up to the market rate, and then also giving some discretion to department heads on being able to place staff who either have exceptional skills or experience at a higher rate, and then with county administrator approval, opening that up along the scale. Because that's a pretty big ask, and it's really not focused just on Health and Human Services, the second request, which reads first here on the motion, to address our immediate needs, to try to retain staff and also recruit staff for the vacancies that we have would be to use the premium pay idea of providing similar, not exactly how Pine Valley did it, but $1 an hour premium pay until more action is taken on the pay plan. I know just from my discussions with Administrator Langrick that it looks like that may, from looking at the pay plan, may be happening sooner than probably what I had realized when we brought this proposal forward to the Health and Human Services Board. So perhaps if there's sooner action, we will be less concerned about that premium pay because staff will see that there's action being taken. But the worry is that we're continuing to lose staff, that we can't meet the service needs that we need to because we're continuously needing to retrain staff to do the jobs. And some of those jobs have some pretty significant consequences in terms of child protection and crisis intervention and those kinds of things. So recognizing that this is coming forward through the Health and Human Services Board, but there's really implications across the county. It was striking to me when I saw the whole county statistics on staff turnover. I don't think historically that we've had that type of turnover. I understand that it is happening in other counties, but that means that we're competing with the same small pool of employees when we're trying to fill our vacancies. So even though other counties are experiencing the same thing, we're all struggling for the same people to work in our counties.
Okay. Anyone want to start us off here? Thoughts or questions?
Mr. Chair.
Looking at the recommended,
Mr. Brewer, can you just pull your mic a little closer and then we'll go to you, Ms. Luck.
looking for the recommended action, motion to approve funding to employee wages. Are you talking all county employees or Health and Human Services employees?
The intentions from the actions coming forward for Health and Human Services was in context of the Health and Human Services employees. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Thorson, but that's.
We were only focused on our agency because that was kind of the scope of what we felt we had focused.
Other conversation pieces that I'm assuming were part of the conversation is until the final ruling came out as well, a premium pay for employees was limited to healthcare types of folks, which put things more in a frame box work for Health and Human Services. With the final ruling changing now, that expands now, and every county employee is eligible for a premium pay and legally up to it's like $13 an hour, which would ARPA funds could be gone, take care of them in the next month if we so choose. But obviously we know that we have a lot of financial challenges on our future infrastructure as well as operation wise. So my recommendation on this is I'm comfortable with like an action on the second motion of a commitment to incorporating cost of living considerations and for step increases to solidify that in like policy type of language. But I would not be in favor of the first action language today.
Okay, Ms. Luck, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I feel like the motion to develop a comprehensive plan is essential, and we absolutely should be doing that. So in my mind, that's something we have been lacking, and we really do need to sit down and figure out how and what we can do. As far as the first one, I would not be comfortable just doing this just for HHS. I would like to see what the numbers would be or what we could possibly do countywide before I would be comfortable moving forward with that particular option.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. C.
One of the things that concerns me, and I recognize that department heads like Ms. Thorson they know their departments and they know the needs of their departments and they understand their finances. But when you look at the county overall, I think we have to at least give some thought to the notion before we start talking about giving people raises here and there. We are not operating on the premise of an overall bird's eye view of the county across the board in terms of where the essential jobs are and where there are jobs that are not quite as essential, where there are positions that may be consolidated with others, where there are offices whose missions are similar to those of other departments that can be consolidated and save money, and where we can save sources in terms of reception people, rather than each department having its own secretary and receptionist. I think we need an overall task analysis of our departments across the county, and I'm not in any way imposing any sort of cynical criticism of Miss Thorson's or other departments at all. I'm not pointing the fingers, but I think that we need to look at the county across the board, and if we have to have an objective study of job analysis, workflow, task analysis, personnel numbers, job functions, office space. I think that needs to be looked at. We've had Carlson and Dedelson come in and they've sit down with people and ask them what their jobs are. But there's been no really overall deep study of the jobs themselves in relationship to the overall mission of the county and whether some of those jobs are duplicitous or redundant. So I'm all in favor of supporting our good employees, retaining them, giving them an incentive to stay with the county. But I think we need to be very careful about this because it could put us in a financial hole that we'll never get out of if we're not aware of who's doing what and where and when. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Seep. I did just want to highlight also, I did have a chance to talk with Ms. Thorson late last week when I knew this was coming, and I had watched the HHS meeting, and one of the, I just lost my train of thought. The communication part of it. She shared with me that, and just correct me if I'm missummarizing this, that because pay raises have been so sporadic and infrequent over the past decade, that employees oftentimes feel like they don't know what the plan is, like what we are actually doing. And it reminded me when she told me that with this strategic plan that we're creating, there are specific strategies listed in the strategic plan about increasing employee pay on a more regular basis to reach market scale. So the strategic planning committee is bringing this to the county board probably soon. And so, assuming the county board passes that as it is, that's a commitment from the county board on a level we probably haven't seen in the past. There is also a section on the efficiency issue that you're talking about, Mr. Seep, in the strategic plan. I just opened it up, and always looking at, do we need to refill this vacant position? How does our staffing compare to other neighboring counties? Things like that. That's going to help us be able to increase the pay for employees as well, if we're being as efficient as possible and not just keeping the same number or increasing the number of employees we've got. So one other item that I did talk about was with Ms. Thorson, that does seem to me that we didn't really address when Pine Valley got that premium pay increase, was that they got pay going back. And so I think they got a lump sum or something like that. And they're in the healthcare field. And part of ARPA money was really meant to help, this whole COVID crisis. And part of Health and Human Services is their health specific staff. And the ambulance department also, they are directly dealing with healthcare. So, people who have been everyone who's been working and dealing with the public has been an increased risk to get COVID and to deal with personal consequences. But I think especially those people in healthcare, have really been putting themselves at risk. So, are we looking at all healthcare employees the same at the county was one of my questions after we had our conversation. So, but I'm certainly in favor of that second motion. I think Ms. Luck put it really well, and I think we're heading in that direction. I think Mr. Langrick's doing a lot of work to figure out how to make that happen with his 10-year financial plan that he's been bringing to us. So I think we just need to be more regularly communicating to employees all these things that the county board is trying to do.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just wanted to clarify something, not that from our discussion, but just when I was asked if this proposal was being brought forward just for Health and Human Services, we're bringing this forward from the Health and Human Services Board, recognizing that that's who we have some effect over. But I guess there's a recognition that Health and Human Services is part of the general employee group on the pay plan, and Health and Human Services couldn't be treated differently. It would, whatever happens needs to happen with the entire pay plan. So I just wanted to make sure that I was not misspeaking, that I was only focused on Health and Human Services.
Thank you for that. It makes me feel a lot better. Mr. Chairman, are you ready for a motion?
Sure, go for it. You can make.
No, you're not ready?
We can still discuss. Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion for the second, basically, however Clint stated it.
A motion to develop a comprehensive plan that includes annually making cost of living updates.
I mean, that's Clint, that's why we hired you. So, I'd make that a motion. I'm not making the part one, though, a motion. Okay.
Let's just clarify though what the motion is, because the way it's written right now, I'm not sure that you intend to have all of that in there. So you want to place employees up to step 5? That part of?
If that's what Clint is recommending, yes, we should have a comprehensive plan. Yes, there should be an annual cost of living updates. Yes, there should be a wage step advancement based on longevity. So if step 5 is a requirement of that, I guess I'm not, you tell me, Clint.
I don't think it's inappropriate. Again, the conversations we've had in context of our employees, we're often asking for a lot of our position employees to have a substantial time in that type of field. We're looking to recruit and steal away, as Tracy pointed out, employees that are mid-career or later career in some cases. So having the ability to be able to advance people on a wage schedule according to their experiences that they've taken on with other counties, other organizations is not inappropriate. I would be in favor of that. At the same time, we would want to have policy kind of crafted to help firm that up, so it's not just a little bit more objective than a subjective type of a decision being made there.
Okay, does anyone want the motion read?
So I'm making that motion, but taking out the language about step 5.
Okay, so your motion is everything up to
Last sentence.
the second comma.
Yeah.
So where it starts with and authorizing, you're not making that part of it.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so motion by Brewer,
I'll second.
second by Luck. So Ms. Gentis, go ahead.
Okay. So, I, of course,
Hold on just a second. You're gonna need a new mic here.
okay.
You can just repeat that.
Is that on? Okay. So I'm confused when this goes into effect, or if we're just talking about making the 2023 budget, and then that's what we're working on here. And I thought the wage scale, we've gone through all the wage scale, and I thought we were trying to stay within the wage scale and deciding how we would move up on that. And it seems sort of, like you said, though, this seems more subjective than objective, so I'm not quite sure I understand this.
I can try to explain it from what I'm picking up from what's being put down today. So the motion going forward is to develop a comprehensive plan, which includes annually making cost of living updates to the wage scale, and then outlining a wage step advancement policy for county employees based on longevity. So those two pieces I would visualize as an item that is overdue is to bring back our authorization compensation policy. Remember, we pushed that through with it being kind of a, let's take all of our resolution languages from several different years that kind of defined our policy and try to push it into one type of a document. So what I would do with this language is I would be coming back in preparation for 2023 compensation changes to say, this is presumably how I think we can incorporate a cost of living increase to keep our schedules to date. So they're still valid the best we can to what we determine as a market value, and then putting in the language of saying how employees are going to progress through the steps. Right now, when we implemented the schedules that we had, I think everybody was allowed to move to a step 2 or 3, and then each year, by motion of the county board, we've authorized longevity employees to continue progression. So kind of finishing, crossing over the threshold of saying, okay, this is our schedule now. New employees are starting here, and how, if it's an annual type of a basis where they're going to be able to progress along that schedule, as well as how the county reflects on keeping that schedule in its entirety up to date. Does that help clarify my vision on this?
Yes, and I'd like to make a further comment. That is one of my criticisms with the Carlson-Detman plan from the get-go. And that is, they gave us a static plan. It was not a living document, if you will. It froze everybody at a certain level, and we had to take resolution action to change it, and it shouldn't be that way. It should all be set up where people know where their progression is going and how much longevity is required, et cetera, or promotional. It could even be based on merit. So this is a step toward solving that dilemma, I believe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I agree with that, but I also don't know if we can promise every year that we're going to do this, because we can't fund it, and that's why I'm confused. That's why we had it stagnant, so that we made the decision when we could fund it. So now we're gonna lock ourselves into having to fund it no matter what. So some people would have to be let go, or things would have to change, right?
What I think you're going to be trying to do is establish expectation for your administrator and for finance and personnel going forward to say, this is a priority for us. So we want early in the year, when we're starting to develop our budget process, that we're reflecting what a CPI projection is going to look like and have that on the table. So then when we hit our decisions and we have our spreadsheet up there on the things that these are the gap expanders and the contractors that we have in there as one of our assumptions. This is our consumer price index change as an example, and this is how much it's going to impact our compensations, and this is by this resolution and this policy, we have it in place. It's a resolution. You can still deviate from it, but it's kind of capturing in a policy what your priorities are. It doesn't mean that you can't deviate from it in the future, but it would require action to do that. And then at the same time too, then that's, you are deviating then from the expectation.
So I had forgotten about this, now that you mentioned it, Mr. Langreich, this policy on personnel classification, compensation, and staff authorization. Did we ever pass this, or was this just in draft form?
We did. It went through with 2 other policies on a night, and it's due to come back before this body and get tidied up with a reconfirmation on the authorization table, as well as proposed changes then for language for progression through the plan.
Okay, so if we pass this motion, then this could be worked into that policy that we already adopted. You could bring it forward as an amended policy. Is that what?
That would be my
Okay.
my vision with it. Yep,
Okay.
that is correct.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Well, every plant, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Did we get a second, first of all? I think Mr. Brewer made the motion.
I think I seconded it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Yep, Mr. Seat, go ahead.
Whatever plan we put together or however we plan, the best laid plans of the county board are dependent upon money, funds, how we fund it. And therefore depends upon how we budget those funds. And if the budget shows us the numbers to implement a plan, fine. If it doesn't, we have to make those hard choices. And it's a pie in the sky thing until you see the numbers, in my view. There's no certainty about the future in running a county's finances. That's for darn sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on this. I know Mr. Brewer needs to get going. No, we got to keep moving here. So, unless anyone wants to overrule me, but we got to keep going. I know Mr. Brewer needs to get out of here. So, let's take a roll call on the vote in front of us here.
Is Turk still abstaining? Brewer? Gentis? Aye. Luck?
Aye.
Beep?
Aye.
Murphy Lopez?
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay. Okay, so that motion carries.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I just speak for a moment?
As long as it's quick, we got to keep moving.
I
here
just,
'cause
I want to
lose my
take the
quorum.
committee for recognizing that this is an issue. The concern that I have is it may not address our current retention recruitment concerns, but this was a really important step, and I appreciate that you recognize that.
Okay,
That's all.
we'll be looking forward to more information coming when a survey is taken of all employees. I know that that's on the docket for in the coming months here, so we'll get a more holistic look there too. Okay, so agenda item number 13, discussion and possible action regarding administrative strategic goals. Mr. Langrick?
Mr. Chair, 2 possible actions today. Motion to approve report on addressing strategic goals, or possible action to amend the priority work plan. Documents that you are familiar with in reviewing those. For brevity's sake, we are closing in on finalization with the strategic plan as led through your strategic plan committee. So we foresee having that done by the end of the session. Our item number 3, resolutions available for ordinance on the internet. We have now approved resolution with the county board and signed contract with MuniCode. So we do have actions on that. I don't think that we'll actually have the computer website up with all the ordinances on it by the end of the session, but we should be well into the process of establishing that. Item number 5, implement a uniform review program. And that was tamped down to completion of department head reviews.
Wait, where are we?
I'm sorry. I'm not.
I'm still looking
You're on
myself.
item number.
looking.
Number 13.
Item number 13, if you
That's
scroll
where
down.
it was, but it didn't have what you had.
If you scroll down to the second page on it, it should get into some.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Let me know when you're there, Linda.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is very small print too. If you're trying to follow
Okay.
along on the screen,
Yeah.
it's probably near impossible. But so item number 5, hoping to complete department head reviews by the end of this session. Item number 8, new county board orientation program. We're going to have some lengthy discussion on this Thursday with rules and resolutions, which should hopefully kind of firm up a lot of the pieces on what directions we're going to be going with committees and appointments and those types of things, so we can kind of put the final touches on that orientation program. And
Do you think the Wisconsin counties is going to offer the training that they did other years? Because they didn't have it the last 2 years, but it was a really good training that they held here in the county.
I can look into it. I'm assuming that they would. It might be on a virtual platform again, but I
Yeah.
can explore that.
I think we're going to be getting into more details on that at the March rules meeting, from what I can tell. So definitely come to that if you want to have some input there.
A full review of county handbook, addendums and administrative manual. I think we're working on finalizing the administrative manual, and then we should be complete on that before the end of the session. And we had our 3 deferred items that we've talked about. Running through the list of the ongoing wish list of programs to consider or initiatives to consider. Some of the additions to it that you'll see is underneath administrative duties, broadband development, actions on broadband grants that are due by March 2022 is on here. The bandwidth, the capacity for us to tackle those right now. I'm kind of feeling like we're at the mercy of the utilities companies pursuing those versus us trying to tackle and wrangle that in the next month. Other item that was recently added underneath financial reports, policy procedure on ensuring workers' compensation certificates with contractors. Be a thing to add. 2 then for human resources, we have policy on pay for performance, which was a discussion item that was had by this body, as well as then policy on volunteer work agreements, harmless language to develop as well. And then moving forward into our ones that we kind of have a target on, I am recommending. Do I have another one? Nope. Then on the bottom page, I've added on to the list for our priority targets at the very bottom, property management administration with the radio tower project, funding, the bond rating, and the call analysis. In order for us to do the bonding, we're going to have a analysis with Moody's. They'll come in. We'll have to, by department, present our finances for our large departments to present our finances, to be able to present to them for them to assess us and getting a bond rating for that. So it's going to be time intensive working with Director Scott, with Sheriff Porter, with Carol Worth, our municipal advisor, and then also with Mike Day from True North, our consultant, on matching that timeline up to understand when we have to have the bonding aspect in place to facilitate the actual construction. And then, oh, by the way, that's all kind of hinged, of course, on a 3/4 vote for the authorization of the expenditures. Mr. Chair.
Okay, any comments? Okay, let's don't hear anyone wanting to make any changes or suggestions there. So why don't we just go ahead and move on to agenda item number 14. You can just slide right into that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking today for a motion to guidance may be given to administration by committee action as germane to the items presented. Background broadband survey. Administrator held a meeting with our UW Extension Director. Representations from the Survey Center, Director Glassbrenner, Supervisor Luck, and Assistant Dull. Bottom line is that we decided that in the conclusion that's in the best interest to allow the Southwest Wisconsin, the Prosperity Southwest Wisconsin survey to kind of run course and get behind and promote that. With the data that comes back, we'd be able to assess gaps, and at that point, it might be more appropriate then to move forward with the with University of Extension Survey Center to do a mail-out survey to try to identify what's going on in the gaps. With the EDA grant extension, received notification from Director Troy Magid that they're putting in a request to extend that grant. Reasons being is that we're ahead of project. So we're looking to be able to procure additional funds, additional expenses to continue on to the following phases with that. So it's a good news, and it looks like the funding's going to come to us. And again, there's no match requirements here, so it allows Troy to help us with strategic planning, with the finalizations on the branding, as well as reaching out to the village of Casanova to engage in the long-term resiliency planning. So it's good news. And then the final one is we talked about the radio tower bonding and procedure project. Going to require some significant kind of work to get that together, and then it's going to be like our short-term borrowing, where we're going to have a 3/4 authorization vote, and then we'll have to have a follow-up vote then for a majority on the actual bond sale. Mr. Chair.
Okay, any comments from the committee on these?
No, are we commenting on the long report you gave last time? Or is that going to come back up again?
That's not on our agenda today. You're talking about the 10-year financial plan?
Yeah, and all that. That was so detailed. We're going to have that again?
Yep, that'll come back, but that's not on the
Okay,
agenda
I just
today.
wanted to, because that I have some questions about. Okay.
Okay, I'm not hearing anyone, so I think we can just go ahead and move on then to agenda item number 15, future agenda items. Mr. Turk, do you have any?
None today, sir.
Okay, Ms. Luck?
Nope, nothing for me.
Mr. Seep?
I will have to get in touch with you later as I process my thinking.
Okay, sounds good. Ms. Jensis?
Well, Melissa Luck answered all my questions today about broadband, and that was good. And I assume that it was in the paper that there's $650,000 for area people. And I don't know if this is the right time to do this, but on February 21, Senator Markline and Tony Kurtz, and I think Mr. Tranel are going to be at Boaz at noon for a listening session. And I went last Monday to a listening session with Tony Kurtz and talked a lot about unmandated funding for mandated funding. And he wrote back, "I appreciate you taking the time and attending our listening session. I really value your input. I do believe next budget cycle we will be visiting the shared revenue formula for counties." So I think it's very important that we keep doing that and we get that on our agenda, how we can get that word across. Yeah. Yeah. I'll move.
I can't hear Sean anymore.
Motion, Linda Gentis, to adjourn.
Do you want to second that, Supervisor Luck?
Sure, I figured that was what was
Okay.
happening, but I couldn't tell.
Thank you. Yeah. So second by Luck, all those in favor of adjourning to that date, please say aye.
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 Thank you for a very good meeting.
Thanks, Mr. Seep. Thanks, everyone, for attending today.
So, Tom, got your thing for the meeting Thursday, the rules and regulations.